Does Sam and Rebecca's relationship have a future? Who is the top scorer on the pinball machine Ted plays on? Did the George Harrison song played in the dressing room have a special meaning? Keep watching and we'll discuss these questions and more. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review, and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. In this video, we'll be looking at episode 8 of season 2 of Ted Lasso. Let's jump straight in. The episode opened with Doctor Sharon in her apartment, talking to Bridget, another therapist, about how her sessions are going with Ted. Sharon has been talking about how frustrated she is with Ted, because he uses humour to avoid getting close to anything too emotional. The other therapist points out Sharon does the exact same thing with her intellect. It's nice to see Dr. Sharon speaking about her frustrations with Ted, as up to now she's hidden behind a professional front, but the version we see here is a lot more genuine. Bridget suggests she'll need to let her guard down to make progress with Ted. Then we see Dr. Sharon cycling into work. And I know it's an Apple TV show, and I like to get their products in whenever possible, but it seems a bit dangerous to be cycling in with both Apple earpods in her ears, as she won't be able to hear the traffic. I don't know whether it's the earpods or just bad luck, but Dr. Sharon is run over by a car, and she's left in a bloody heap on the floor. Even her Apple iPhone has a smashed screen, so with the help of another piece of Apple product placement, we can see that it's a really bad accident. The players are in the gym, and Jamie gets a call from his dad. He rejects the call, but looks annoyed about it. It's quite revealing that Jamie has his dad's name saved in his phone book with quote marks around the word dad, as if to say he's not a proper dad to him. On the other side of the gym, Sam gets a call from his dad to tell him that Cerithium Oil is pulling out of Nigeria, and it's partly down to the negative publicity they received after the protest Sam carried out earlier in the season. Sam's father tells him how proud he is of him. Jamie's watching and listening, and it's clear he's envious of the relationship that Sam has with his father. So much so that he's forgotten that he's meant to be spotting Colin, and he nearly chokes. Sam's good morning gets even better when he invites the mystery woman he's been chatting with on Bantr out on a date, and she says yes. He's delighted, and the rest of the team celebrate with him too. He decides to ask Isaac for a haircut, which causes a stir among everyone, but Isaac agrees. It's clear from the way everyone responds that asking Isaac for a haircut is a big deal. Ted has gone to hospital to be there for Sharon, but it's clear that she's less than delighted to see him. She's got concussion and she's had a couple of stitches in her head, so the hospital require to have someone with her before they'll let her go. So no matter how much she might not want Ted around her, keeping him with her is the only way she can get out of hospital. Roy attends a meeting at his niece Phoebe's school that the teachers requested because Phoebe's been caught swearing. I was going to say she's been caught excessively swearing, but that suggests there's an appropriate amount of swearing that's okay for a 9-year-old. When the teacher asks Roy if he knows where she might be getting her swearing from, he does a brilliant impression of looking completely confused. That's despite the fact he can barely go a single sentence without swearing. The teacher asks Roy to try and use his influence to improve Phoebe's behaviour. Dr. Sharon continues to be unhappy to have Ted helping her as they walk back to her apartment. It turns out he came to the hospital because she called and left a series of voice notes on his phone while she was concussed and a little bit all over the place. We get to hear one of her confronting Ted about him talking rubbish to her because he's too afraid to connect with his feelings, and another one where she sings Tonight from West Side Story. We then find out that Isaac only gives each player one haircut a season, so it should only be requested for very special occasions, which shows that Sam is very excited about his date with his mystery woman on Bantr, which we know is Rebecca, but he doesn't yet. The whole team gathers to watch the haircut, and love watching Isaac showing off his craft. Jamie's pulled away though, as he gets a text from his dad to ask if he's sorted out his Wembley tickets yet. Jamie goes to see Higgins, who's relocated to a broom cupboard after Dr. Sharon started using his office. Higgins agrees to sort out the tickets for Jamie's dad, but it's obvious from the conversation that Jamie doesn't want anything to do with his father, and their relationship is very strained. After Higgins has taken the details, Jamie thanks Higgins and asks him if he wants the door leaving open or closed. These are only small courtesies, but at the same time, Jamie Tartt from season 1 would almost certainly not have said thank you, and would have walked off the second he got what he wanted from someone without thinking about whether they wanted the door open or closed. While he's not perfect, Jamie Tartt has definitely changed this season, and he's a much more likeable and rounded character now. Roy talks to Phoebe about her swearing, and how she needs to cut it out. He worries that he's not trained on how to deal with kids, and she's infected with the worst parts of him. She says that that's not true, and she's only calling people names because she's standing up to bullies, like Roy has taught her to do, but she says she'll do it without swearing now. Ted gets Sharon back to her apartment, and despite her attempts to get rid of him, he invites himself in. After he sat down her mangled bike, Ted takes a look around her apartment and notices the collection of empty bottles by the sink. Then, rather than comment on them, he prattles on about other things and tries to change the subject. Dr. Sharon seems intensely uncomfortable with having Ted in her personal space and can't wait for him to leave, so much so that she has the door open the second he's gulped down the glass of water that she's poured for him. That evening, Rebecca is waiting outside the restaurant because she's too nervous to go in for her date. She has a video chat with Keeley, who's either wearing a face mask or is moonlighting as a mime on her evenings, and the pep talk is enough to get her to swallow down her fears and go inside. Inside, Sam and Rebecca see each other at the bar and dismiss them both being there as an embarrassing coincidence. That's until Sam sends a message on Bantr and it pings on Rebecca's phone, and they both realise what's happening. Their reactions are brilliant. Sam laughs with surprise, but Rebecca is less amused. This makes sense as Sam has less to lose, being a young man, but Rebecca is the one who will be criticised for their relationship, with her being the boss, the older woman, and the owner of the football club. Rebecca insists that nothing can happen between them, but Sam manages to talk her into at least having a meal with him. Then there's a montage of them eating, drinking, and generally enjoying each other's company. And you know if there's a montage, either you're training for a big fight or two people are falling in love, and neither of them are about to start fighting Ivan Drago anytime soon. And we see Ted calling Dr. Sharon to see how she's doing. While they're talking on the phone, Sharon opens up to Ted about how she was scared when she had her accident. Ted tries to share with her some of his wisdom, but she shuts him down and tells him she just wanted to share that with him. Ted is clearly glad that he's breaking through Sharon's icy exterior and making a connection with her. Sam walks Rebecca back to her house after their meal and they kiss on her doorstep. She says that it must never happen again, but in the kind of way that I say I'm not going to have another biscuit, but then 5 minutes later I've got my hand back in the biscuit barrel. Then the episode shifts gears as we go to Wembley Stadium for the FA Cup semi-final against Manchester City. The coaches and players go out onto the pitch to take it all in, and Ted gives a speech to the players to try and settle their nerves before they play in the National Stadium against a much bigger team. Before the game starts, the coaches are gathered together and Ted is doing some breathing exercises that Dr. Sharon has given to him. Before they head out for the game, Ted tells the other coaches and Higgins the real reason he left the Spurs game early was because he was having a panic attack, which he'd been having fairly regularly, and he wanted them to know the truth. This leads to the others making their own confessions, with Higgins admitting that he messed up the time zones on a transfer, which led to them missing out on an amazing Brazilian fullback. Roy tells them that he doesn't read the scouting reports because he finds them boring. Nate pretends to have good ideas in the moment, but really he's thought of them well in advance and just pretends to be struck by inspiration. And, best of all, Bader was accidentally high on magic mushrooms when Richmond played Port Vale. Then we get the game itself between Man City and AFC Richmond, and it's not the fairy tale we hoped for, with Man City taking the lead early and then coasting to an emphatic 5-0 victory, and that leaves AFC Richmond feeling bruised and dejected after the final whistle. There's a sombre atmosphere in the dressing room after the game until Jamie Tartt's dad, a Man City fan, comes in to gloat. Jamie's dad is horrible to the whole team, but he's particularly nasty to his own son. Jamie tries to walk away from the abuse he's receiving, but his dad grabs him by the shoulder, which leads to Jamie spinning around and punching his dad to the floor. Coach Beard escorts Jamie's dad out of the changing room, making sure to bump him heavily into the door on his way out. Then there's a loaded silence, with Jamie just stood there and everyone else looking around waiting for someone to do something. It feels like it should be Ted, as the leader of the team, who comforts Jamie in this moment, but it's actually Roy, Jamie's former rival, that steps up and gives him a hug. And, in fairness, it looks like a pretty amazing hug, and Jamie leans right into it. Any rivalry between the two men is forgotten, and we see that Roy is still a huge leader in the changing room. Ted seems completely overwhelmed by Jamie and Roy's embrace, and walks out of the changing room. He's gone outside to call Dr. Sharon. The situation with Jamie and his dad has stirred up some memories and feelings that he wanted to share with her. His father took his own life when Ted was 16, and he tells that he thinks that might be where some of his issues stem from. After Ted finishes his phone call, he sees Beard on his way out of the stadium. He tells Ted that he won't be travelling back with the team because he wants to go shake off the defeat. Rebecca is back at her home, and Sam's post-match interview prompts her to text him. He replies instantly, and when she opens the front door, he's there waiting for her. While this is obviously meant to be romantic and not creepy, it does make me wonder if he was lurking outside her house waiting for a message. Regardless, they kiss again, and the episode ends. Thought this was another superb episode, one of the best in the season, packed with great episodes. There were a few really big moments, with Sam and Rebecca finally finding out they'd been messaging each other, Jamie and his dad having their big confrontation in the changing room, and Ted revealing a huge secret from his past to Dr. Sharon. It was also nice to see the show get to spend time in and around Wembley Stadium too, which is a special place to any English football fan, and it added a bit of authenticity to the storytelling. I initially found Sharon quite a hard character to like, because she was quite cold and emotionless, but that was a professional front that she was putting on. In this episode that dropped, firstly to her own therapist when she talked about her frustrations with Ted, then to Ted via her concussed voice notes, and then later she really opened up to Ted about how the accident had shaken her up. This was a significant moment for Ted and Sharon's relationship, as I don't think Ted would have opened up to her about his past if she'd not been honest with him earlier. Ted's reaction to seeing Jamie and his dad fighting wasn't a huge surprise. Earlier in the season, Jamie had asked Ted if his dad was tough on him, and Ted had said that his father was more hard on himself than anyone else, which was a nod towards this episode's revelation. Relationships with fathers are a running theme in Ted Lasso, so it makes sense that Ted's father has a key role to play in his mental struggles. Now that he shared this information about his father's death with Dr. Sharon, it'll be interesting to see where this takes their therapy. I'm glad to see that Rebecca and Sam have finally got together this episode, after many episodes of them chatting with each other through the Bantr app. Sam doesn't seem all that bothered about the age gap, but it's clearly more of an issue for Rebecca. She's the one with far more to lose in the relationship, so it makes sense. Though it also has to be said that she's the one that initiated things at the end of the episode. It was quite a sad episode for Jamie. We knew his dad wasn't a nice guy from the brief scene we saw of him in the season 1 finale, when he berated Jamie for making the extra pass rather than going for glory himself. Jamie has been a bit of a villain on the show in the past, but now we've met his father, it's a bit of a surprise he's turned out as nice as he has, really. Seeing more of Jamie's dad also makes sense of why he sought out father figures in the show, in the shape of Ted, and possibly now Roy too. My favourite line in this episode came from Ted, when he said, "Sorry about that, Mike. We all know you have a penis," after Nate had suggested Mike Dean, the referee, might be a eunuch in a foul-mouthed tirade from the touchline. While the other coaches were losing their cool, it's nice that Ted still had a sense of good manners in the middle of a heavy defeat. Sam is reading a well-thumbed copy of A Wrinkle in Time while he's on the exercise bike before he gets a call from his dad. Could this be Roy's copy that Ted gave him in Season 1? Roy was given it to help him become a better leader. Could this choice of book be a hint towards Sam becoming a future leader in the team? When Ted is looking around Doctor Sharon's apartment, he spots that she's reading The Middle Passage by James Hollis. The subtitle for the book is From Misery to Meaning in Midlife, and from what I can tell, that's a good summary of what the book is about. It's a book that's influenced by the Jungian school of psychotherapy and covers finding a sense of purpose in the middle of your life, looking at the role work plays in life. It's probably not the easiest book to read when you're living in a characterless corporate apartment and are struggling a bit at work like Dr. Sharon is. Ted is playing a Wizard of Oz pinball machine in this episode, which is likely a deliberate choice as Ted is from Kansas, just like the lead character in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy. We get a glimpse of the high scores on the machine. Ted has the 2nd, 4th and 5th high scores. Coach Beard has the 3rd, but the top scorer has the initials ACM. According to the Richmond Till We Die podcast, this is Andrew Carlos Moskos, the co-owner of the Chicago Improv Theatre that Jason Sudeikis and Brendan Hunt both know. After the scene where Ted is playing the Wizard of Oz pinball machine, we cut straight to a scene where Rebecca is wearing red-soled high-heeled shoes. This may be a nod to the ruby slippers from the Wizard of Oz. Ted's Wembley speech to the players, where he keeps making mistakes, is inspired by a similar speech Gene Hackman gave in the film Hoosiers, where he plays a basketball coach of a team that reaches the state championship finals. He has his team measure the height of the basket and the distance to the free throw line to make the point that the court is the same size as the one back home. Ted's attempt to make the same point to his team is undermined when he finds out that the Wembley pitch is actually bigger than Richmond Stadium. Even Jamie Tartt shouting Richmond is a nod to the film, where a basketball player shouts Hickory into the empty stadium. When the coaches are confessing to each other at Wembley, we get a glimpse of the tactics board for the game. While I'm not a professional coach, I have played plenty of football management simulation games, which is basically the same thing. These tactics look like a classic example of coaches who are overthinking things. The arrows next to each player show that they're being given too many and occasionally contradictory instructions. For example, Jamie Tartt is being told to drop deep into midfield, but also to try and get in behind the defensive line, and to pull into central areas. Giving players so many instructions tends to confuse them, so it's no surprise that Man City won so heavily. The referee for this game was Mike Dean, a real-life former Premier League referee. Like most referees, he was often unpopular with fans. He also had a tendency to be overly elaborate on the pitch, which meant he was frequently criticised for wanting to be the centre of attention. Seeing as though this section of the video is also dedicated to pointless trivia, I may as well also tell you that Mike Dean used to work in a chicken slaughterhouse, so that's Premier League footballers and chickens that hate him. Oh, and Nate Shelby too, after Mike gave him a yellow card in this episode for using foul and abusive language. The Man City fans can be seen doing a distinctive celebration when they're beating Richmond, where they turn their backs to the game, put their arms on each other's shoulders and bounce up and down. This is called the Poznan. It's called that because City picked up the celebration when playing the Polish side Lech Poznan in the Europa League back in 2010 and saw the home fans perform the celebration, and they took it back to Manchester with them. Poznan fans initially started doing this as a protest at the club's management rather than a celebration, as they wanted to support the club by being in the stadium, but make a protest by noticeably turning their back on them. But over time it morphed into a celebration. The George Harrison song, Beware of Darkness, plays during the dressing room scene just after Jamie Tartt has punched his dad. George Harrison's death is referenced by Jamie earlier in the season as one of the reasons for him doing the reality TV show Lust Conquers All. The song includes the line, "The pain that often lingers in your fingers," which plays as the camera rests on Ted, which feels like a nod towards the nervous hands feeling Ted gets just before he has a panic attack. According to IMDb's trivia page, Sarah Niles, the actor who plays Doctor Sharon, didn't know how to ride a bike before she got this part, so she had to get her friends to teach her. Looking ahead, the very next episode is called Beard After Hours, and it's a one-off episode that covers the night out that Coach Beard has to try and shake off this defeat. I'm looking forward to that episode a lot, as Beard doesn't get a lot of screen time, but whenever he does, he's funny, so a whole episode of Beard on a big night out should be a lot of fun. After that, there'll just be 3 episodes left in the season, and with AFC Richmond out of the Cup, there's just the league to concentrate on. The FA Cup semi-final usually takes place around April time, so that'll mean there's probably only a handful of games left for AFC Richmond to decide whether they're going to make it back to the Premier League or not. Off the field, the big development this episode was Sam and Rebecca getting together. It'll be very interesting to see what happens next, as it feels like this kind of relationship couldn't survive everyone knowing about it. But both Sam and Rebecca had talked so much to people at the club about their big date, they'll have to do some backtracking and covering up if they want to keep their relationship secret. While it's a romantic storyline, it's hard to see a practical way their relationship can work out in the long term. But I suppose long-term strategy isn't what you think about when you fall for someone. Another big development was Ted opening up to Sharon, which only happened because their relationship deepened over this episode. as Ted came to help Sharon at the hospital, and Sharon shared some of her feelings with Ted. I really hope that Ted is now at the point where he can get the help that he needs from Sharon. It was pretty heartbreaking to see him freeze up in the dressing room when it was obvious that Jamie needed him. Roy stepped in and filled that role, but Ted's team is now stopping him from being effective in his job, and that'll be hard for him as he's mostly managed to cover it up until recently. We didn't really see any more of Nate's darker side in this episode, aside from him abusing the referee, which is fairly normal for football coaches, sadly. But that's been a recurring theme in this series, so we can expect to see more of that in upcoming episodes. Thank you for watching my recap and review of episode 8 of season 2 of Ted Lasso. I'll be back with my video for episode 9 in a few days' time. Goodbye.